everything you see and touch, whether that's the car, the lamppost, the laptop, every single thing was already here on Earth, has always been here on Earth. There's very few things that have come from outer space that have, it's just a different form. We've dug into the ground, we've pulled things up, we've pulled out old dinosaurs and we've made it into oil, or like all of these things, or the Earth has made it into oil, were already there. They're just converted into, it's just one thing.
Welcome to the Mindful Paths podcast with Nick Day and Hari Kalymnios, where we explore the fascinating world of mindset, mindfulness, fitness, well-being, vitality, leadership, and of course, personal development.
Our goal is to provide you with insights to help you live a more fulfilling, happier, and healthier life.
So if you're striving to be a better parent, friend, leader, colleague, or boss, or if you simply want to be more mindful and aware of the world around you, then this Mindful Paths podcast is going to be for you.
We invite you to eavesdrop on our conversations, and we challenge you to discover a new insight to help you on your own journey towards personal growth and positive change.
So sit back,
relax, and let's begin our journey together
on the Mindful Paths podcast. Hello, buddy. How you doing?
Good evening, Nick. Yeah, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm glad you could finally join me after I've just established for those listening that Hari was waiting on another link. And I thought, finally, I'm the one that's early and Hari's the one that's late. But lo and behold, you were there just on the wrong link. Allegedly, anyway. Good to see you,
allegedly. No, it's good. It's good to be here. Nice to chat. It's always a bit of a hectic one sometimes when I have this mentoring group, which I had at 6 o'clock. And so we were doing that from 6 till 7, and then I was frantically trying to make some food and then get on call. So I was already said to you, 10 minutes late, and you were like, perfect. And then ended up being I was 15 minutes late. So never mind.
No rest for the wicked, mate. It's what it is. You're a busy man. So it should be you talking about entrepreneurialism and all the things you're doing rather than.
Oh, I don't think I'm as busy as you, Mister. I don't think I'm as busy as you. In fact, actually, I started to book a holiday today for the first time.
Okay.
I'm going to go to Lesbos, which is a Greek island, and I'm going on this thing. I don't know if you've heard this brand. My friend put me in touch with it called Mark Warner. You'd probably quite like it. Mark Warner. They're similar to like Nielsen stuff, but their activity. So they're all in. So flights, accommodation, food, but then all the activities as well. So they have like daily classes, like 3-4 times a day. Like I'm going to take my my road bike shoes out there because they've got like road bikes, they've got mountain bikes, they've got sailing, windsurfing. So it's all part and parcel of it. So he's quite active. Sorry?
When do you go?
Wednesday. So I only booked it today.
Oh wow! Okay.
I called them last week and they said, if you wait till Monday, you might get even more of a discount. Wasn't much off, but so I'm going just for a week because I've got time off anyway. So I'm going for a week and then I'll probably stop by Brighton for a few days on the way back. But I'm looking forward to just going, and I wanted to go and do a bit of focus of exercise. The other option was Cyprus because my folks are going there now, but I didn't really want to do that.
My brother's just come back from is it Thessalonica or somewhere like that?
Thessalonica.
Amazing.
Thessalonica.
Yeah, that's right. Too. And he said it was like an undiscovered place. He highly recommended it. It's kind of. He said it'd be perfect for stag do's if you wanted to go, loads of bars, but no stag do's do. So it's kind of undiscovered.
Oh, really?
It's like really nice. Loads of really nice bars, good food. I've not been myself. Obviously.
I'm pretty sure that's where we would pass. For years I've been saying we should do an Istanbul to Athens bike ride, which would take about 9 days. So we'd have to do
1 day, mate. 1 day.
Well, Thessalonica is where we'd go through.
Maybe when we get this podcast up and running with huge listeners, we can put a little GoFundMe page and they can fund our trip across Turkey and Greece. I've actually got Ironman Stafford on Sunday, which I thought was not this weekend, but the weekend after. And I suddenly discovered that it's this weekend. So it was a bit of a shock to the system. That's my bad preparation. But it hasn't been in my mind because I've been injured and I haven't done any
training. I was going to say, how's the quad?
Quad's all right, but I've done an injury. I haven't mentioned it on the show, but I've done another injury to my hip, like hip flexor, which is I haven't ran for 4 weeks. I've done 1 run in 4 weeks. I've done no swimming for those that track what I'm doing on Strava for 4 weeks. I've been on the turbo, but I haven't cycled the distance I'm doing on Sunday for 8 months. So it's going to be the first race where I'm really under prepared, and it's like I haven't even looked at the race info. But it's made me that's kind of enjoying the setup now. Like there's no pressure to perform because there's no way that I physically can. I'm just not in shape for it. I did it last year. There's literally zero chance. There's no ego talking here. There is genuinely zero chance of me getting anywhere near the time I got last year. So We're gonna make a family day out. Family
Is it
coming.
a full Ironman, is it?
No, it's a
Or
half. It's a half. So I
half?
think last year was 4:47, so this year will be probably 5:10,
5.5?
5:15. If I get under 5, I'll be delighted. I think that's going to push. It means we'll be done by what, 1:45. Have a nice lunch in Stafford, little one around town, and it should be a good weekend.
Fair play, mate. Fair play. What we're going to talk about today, I think we talked about it a bit last week. Well, not last week, off air last week, or when we met last week. And you want to talk about it, and I think it's quite an interesting topic. And we're talking about connection,
social connection in particular, right? Just to make that clear, the idea of being connected to others and how it can impact our well-being and
yeah, I mean,
or not. That's what angle I was taking.
Yeah, so when you were talking about connection, and this is what I was going to say, maybe not necessarily social connection, and we can talk about that, but more connectedness.
Okay. I think they probably are both connected, right? Yeah, probably. Yeah, that's fine. That's cool. So we're always going to take a different angle on it, aren't we? So
I'm going to go from a more esoteric point of view, and that's where I was going with some of my brushing up on my research sort of thing. But connectedness and connection is a massive part of the beat model, right? It comes under the activity part of the BEAT beat model, because for me, like we've talked about before, I realized that connection is hugely important. And what's interesting for me is over the last few years, where the whole COVID pandemic hit, is people started to realize the things that I'd realized a decade and a half ago. And one of those things they realized was the importance of human connection with one another for mental well-being, but also physical well-being. So it's quite interesting that kind of came about. And obviously we've been massively challenged over the last few years with connection. Sure. And one of the reasons that I go to the Mind Valley thing, which I'll be doing in July, is primarily for that connection piece. And like I've said before, sometimes when you focus on one area of the beat model, the other areas will fall by the wayside. So I know that when I go for the connection piece in Mind Valley, the sleep is going to definitely drop. The exercise will probably to some degree drop. I tend to do a lot of steps, but not really formal exercise. The food may drop a little bit. So a bunch of other things are going to drop, but that's okay. That's the whole point of the beat model, is that
we know for those that listen to that episode that something for you, the one bucket that you sometimes do that does need a little bit of refilling in your instance, is the social one, right? Is that connected?
That's the biggest one. I'd say that there's probably like 2 or 3 main ones. One is the connection piece, the social one. The other one would, I guess, be being outside in nature enough, although I do get out to the park probably 3 times a week, but like actual nature would be really good. And then the one I'm rectifying at the moment as well in the tranquility piece is having enough holidays and doing holidays. They're 3 that I probably fall down with quite a bit, but connection is probably the biggest one.
I think what's quite nice about this subject is a lot of the shows we've done so far have talked a lot about thoughts and feelings and mindset. This is a little bit more linked to well-being, I think. It's slightly different to, I mean, it's all closely linked, but I think the well-being side, there's a lot of studies, a lot of information out there, particularly post-pandemic. I've had guests on my other shows that talks about this a lot, where it's been shown that close relationships actually are make us a lot happier than fame, than money, than what I would call tools, right? That idea of having a close relationship with somebody and maintaining those close relationships actually give us much more happiness throughout our lives than any of the tools like money, which I think is a tool that anything else can provide us. And I think that's in a post-pandemic world where loneliness became a real pandemic, problem of its own proportions as a result of that, right? And there's a lot of stuff to talk about.
It's been heading there for a long time. I mean, actually, you talk about friends being more important than money. That's one of the things that they put on the side of the Lululemon bags, the yoga brand, Lululemon.
Ah, nice. Yeah, I like it. They got good stuff. It's really good stuff.
I'm wearing Lululemon top, Lululemon trousers. I tend to only buy Lululemon. I need to be able to move my legs. And I find that so many people are so restricted in their movement and their clothing. So that's why I only buy barefoot trainers, barefoot shoes.
We sound like an advert for We're not. I promise you, we're not sponsored by Lululemon. I'm not sponsored.
Just... Totally, totally. But the pandemic definitely, I think, accelerated the whole loneliness thing. We are entering that way anyway, and I think part of that is just modern society. For example, people are living if you look around at the buildings, right, they're building these 1 and 2 bedroom flats as opposed to these 3, 4 bedroom houses a lot of the time, and we start to live in these isolated ways, at least in the West, where we don't have these extended families living with us. People are living single longer. Like when I think about my mum getting married at 20, she was engaged by 19. My grandmother, actually, from my dad's side anyway, she was, this will sound crazy, right? Especially to you, bearing in mind that Eva's 13. My grandmother from my dad's side, my paternal was married at 14 and had her first child by 16, which is
my mum was married at 17.
Your mum was married at 17?
She was, yeah.
Wow.
That doesn't surprise me at all. And my sister had her first child at 16. So
really? Wow. Well, there you go.
Not surprised at all.
I did not know that.
I'd like to add my mum is still happily married now. In fact, it'll be her 50th wedding anniversary in January.
Oh, wow. Yeah, my parents are on 52 at the moment, 52 years. So and the thing is, like, but now, you know, it went to 25, 30, and that, I think the average age is beyond 30, and a lot of people having children much later as well. And we're living in these isolated places, and I think we know my feelings about technology and social media. It's a kind of a love-hate or hate-hate relationship. We're using technology now to reach out to people, which is great. And we wouldn't have had this conversation maybe otherwise. But at the same time, then it can be an easy substitute. And in fact, the other day, actually, speaking of connection, I was invited to a good friend of mine's sister's 40th, where I've been very good friends with her family, and the extended group. And I've got like a second Asian family, if you like. They're all like Indian. And talking of connection, one of the things I really value about their parents is their parents were friends in the 60s and all went to medical school together, came over in the 70s to the UK, and they all grew up through the medical field together. And then they all had kids around the same time who are now the friends that I've got through school connections and otherwise. And I've always admired that about them, because I know that connection and social connection is so important for longevity.
In a lot of studies on this post-pandemic, there's actually science that proves that connection improves longevity, along with a host of other benefits, which I'm sure we'll get into during the course of the show.
Oh, yeah.
You were talking about your friends. Interestingly, I went back to my dad's birthday was over the weekend, 3rd of June. He went home. And my auntie, his sister, created a family album for each of her siblings. And one of them, my dad got one. It's like A3 size, massive thing. And in there, you open it up, we're talking photos from my great, great, great grandparents in this album. And she's done a full family tree history, but with actual photos of different. Man, when you look at it, the feelings that kind of brings up when you look at people you've never actually met, but you know they're kind of part of your family history and your family tree, and you're looking at all that. And you see your grandparents. I saw my grandpa and my grandma, sadly no longer with us, but pictures of them as kids. Yeah. And then pictures when they grow up, and wow, it's just a really nice social, just a connection thing. Even though it's through a picture, you still feel that sense of connection.
Oh, definitely.
You connect through memory, you connect through that feeling of hereditary family.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my mum, who listens to our podcast, so she'll be listening to this, so I'm going to do a shout out to her, because she actually spent probably a year or two putting together something similar. So she created a whole book of all the ancestors, the family tree, and then my nieces as well. So there's pictures of us at different ages, the family tree going up to great grandparents and everything. And so I've got the books behind me actually somewhere there that she printed off like 10 copies of or something like that, and gave it to each of the kids and grandkids and things. So yeah, I mean, connection's super important. I think we mentioned in one of the previous podcasts the I think it's the Grant study, which is that longevity study that started in the 1930s. Find that actually human connection was the most important thing. But I was going to ask you, maybe this will lead us into my more esoteric understanding of connection, is why do you think that human connection is so important? Why do you think this connection is so important for our health and our well-being?
For me, it's innate. That's. I mean, we know there's lots of studies that say that it releases chemicals in the body from things like oxytocin and things like that, which make us feel good anyway. But it's innate. I think compassion is innate. We naturally want to. And actually, if you use go to Darwinism, right? Everyone talks about the survival of the fittest. It's not necessarily the case. If you go through the humans in particular have survived. It's actually those that have shown more love and compassion and togetherness and family orientation that have actually come through the test of time. So I think it's an innate thing. And that probably comes for me, in my views, from being brought up by a mum who's specialized in baby development, who's looked at children and studied baby brains and studied how they develop and how their sense of belonging to a parent, their need. I was talking about often babies cry, just a security mechanism to say, hey, is mummy still here? So we need that connection right from birth.
Oh, absolutely.
There was a really interesting study that was done by the Max Planck Institute. I thought it was really interesting, where they observed 2-year-olds. And it was a really simple study, nothing too complex. But the experimenter in that particular study would have 2-year-olds in a room, and he would just drop things. And the 2-year-olds would innately go and pick that thing up and bring them back and help. And he put obstacles in the way. So that as long as they could see what he did, every time he'd drop something, the obstacles would, they would navigate the obstacles, pick up the thing and bring it back to the experimenter. And I think that at 2 years old, we haven't got the consciousness to overthink these things, which suggests, therefore, it's an innate response. But we know, and actually post-pandemic, there's been loads of neurological studies, I'm sure you've read. There's a really good book, but which is all about, it was called Why Are We So Wired to Connect? Why Are We So Wired to Connect? In that book, they talk about all the neurological connections that happen in the brain in relation to social connection. So, you know, as I said, oxytocin being one, but the dopamine response. So I think, for me, it's an innate thing. I think we need it. Every study shows we live longer. Our immune system is stronger. We feel better. And I work in the world of recruitment, where the one thing you teach people when you're speaking to clients and candidates is you need to mirror them. You mirror people. That makes them feel like they belong. And actually, we do that naturally. If someone smiles at you in the street, we tend to smile back. If someone shows you a really shitty face, tend to feel the same way back. So for me, it's quite an innate response.
Yeah, I think when I remember studying NLP and they were talking about matching and mirroring and things like that, and people often think, oh, isn't that a bit manipulative and this and that. I can say to them, look, when you look at a group of friends in the pub, they are naturally, because they're in sync with each other.
We do it naturally.
Yeah. So all NLP did, neuro-linguistic program, was decode what we already do and put it into a framework for you. It's not, so that's why I say it's not necessarily manipulation. But I wanted to bring up a couple of things. And the Darwin thing is interesting because he's often misquoted and people don't actually understand a lot of what he said. But one of the things, I think, it wasn't really survival of the fittest anyway. I think it was survival of the fittest community or something like that. So it was innate about the community. But the other thing I wanted to mention, as your mum's into baby development, maybe she'll be able to point me to the right study. But I've written about this in the book that's coming up, and by this point it might even be hearsay, but I remember hearing about this experience where it was like an orphanage or something like that, and all the babies were there, and what happened was there was one baby at the end who tended to not get sick, not be that ill, survive much longer than the other babies and thrived in the end. And it turned out that actually there was the baby at the end of the row, because the nurse, when she got to the end of the row and she'd done all the stuff that she needed to do with the babies, she had more time with the baby at the end, and so she would hug it and support it and things. And I was thinking about that the other day as I was watching this movie. I like my movies, and I was watching this movie called Old.
This is the recent one when he goes to the beach. Terrible movie, right? I actually was skipping through it, but one thing that triggered my memory for this particular study was, the teenager ages, and then she has the baby dies because hasn't got enough time to be cared for.
Exactly. So she didn't have enough time to be cuddled, and so died within 5 minutes.
Spoiler alert, but we're a bit late for a spoiler alert.
Yeah, it's not
terrible
the best
movie. The biggest spoiler, just don't watch it.
Yeah, don't watch it. I was watching it, to be honest, like skipping forward every 10 seconds here or there because it was on my mobile as I was taking the tube. But the point is that human connection is so important. But I think what I was talking about last time, I was talking about heart math, and I was saying how the energy fields from the heart and the head are interconnected within ourselves, but at the same time, when we are touching someone else or in a close proximity, our fields are interfering. Now, where I want to go with the more esoteric side of things is that we see what we see, right? Which is our body, our tables, our chairs, and everything else. But we know that there's a lot of invisible stuff around us, right? EMFs, for one of a better example, radio waves, whatever.
Yeah.
So there are things that we can't see that have an impact on us, because they have an impact because we can hear the radio if we turn on the radio, right? So we know that they're there. Same with the waves that we've got, right? We are connected on a level that is somewhat physical because it's interference of waves or frequencies, but we can't see it because we're not physically touching that person. And I guess where I wanted to go with this is I've been, as you know, studying things like mindset, mindfulness, meditation, yoga for a long, long time. But also my background was in physics and astrophysics and particle physics and quantum physics as well. And as I started studying both of those things more and more and more, I started to see the commonalities between where they'll both get into eventually. And science is now starting to get to a point where they're effectively saying what ancient yogis and gurus have been saying for a long time, which is effectively there's no separation and that we're all connected in some way, shape, or form. And the word yoga itself means union, or to yoke, means to bring together effectively. And so where I wanted to say this is that every spiritual teaching that I tend to get deeper and deeper into ultimately says the same thing. And that is, we are one, that we are one. And it's because we feel that we're separate from one another that actually ultimately leads to a lot of conflict and pain and suffering, because we don't see the connector. This is why we have wars, right? If you realize that we're effectively one tree, all separate branches and leaves of the same tree, we wouldn't be hurting ourselves, because ultimately it hurts the organism as a whole. And I think, one of the experiences that always I think back to, not that I've had, but that astronauts tend to report back when they say they have this almost like spiritual experience when they see the Earth, because they're seeing it as one unit. And if you look at the Earth, or even if you're not looking at the Earth, but you're looking from high up on a plane, and you see, I always think when you see the roads and you see the traffic light, not the traffic lights, but the lights from the cars, the red lights and the amber lights, and they're going in different ways. I always think about it like the body and the blood vein and the veins and the blood going in and out of the heart. And our whole planet is almost like an organism in itself. Now, when we look at our bodies, we just see it as one body. But if we were to go in at a deeper level, microscopic level, we'd see individual cells, individual blood cells, and so on. Those cells don't consider themselves separate from one another, I wouldn't imagine. They're all part of the same unit. Now, when we go zoom out, we see ourselves more as connected in a whole unit. I don't know if any of this is making sense, but...
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit off air last time about... you and I spoke off air about what love is, and what we can go into the God question as well. It's like, what is God or whatever else? But we talk about energies, and I think you're the astrophysicist here, but the law of Newton's law is like something along the lines of no energy can be created or destroyed. It's only converted from one form of energy to another, right?
Yeah.
So the energy is constant. It's always there. So it has to be moving around. And if we think of love in that instance, then C.P. Banks says that is something that I love, the 3 principles, but he talks about how we are love. We embody love. That's an energy. We are energy passing. And it actually transcends most religions as well. If you look at the Buddhist religion and the energy passing on, but we are connected through that energy as the breath that we breathe. If we're in the same space, the chances are we're going to be breathing the same oxygen that someone else has breathed many times before. We're going to be sharing energy and sweat and water, the water that's in the earth, all these things.
This is the thing is that I wanted to say about COVID illuminating to a lot of people what, maybe I've been thinking about for a long, long time. I thought that people through COVID would understand that idea of connection even more, because, like you say, COVID was transmitted almost exclusively through the breath. That's basically how we are all breathing the same air. We're all breathing, like every time we take a breath in, apparently we're taking in like 100,000 atoms that were once in Marilyn Monroe or JFK or someone like that. Like it's all there. And I think we're talking about energy not being created or destroyed. Something that always blows my mind is that everything you see and touch, whether that's the car, the lamppost, the laptop, every single thing was already here on Earth, has always been here on Earth. There's very few things that have come from outer space that have, it's just a different form. We've dug into the ground, we've pulled things up, we've pulled out old dinosaurs and we've made it into oil, or like all of these things, or the Earth has made it into oil, were already there. They're just converted into, it's just one thing. And as we get more and more into, and I know you're not so much of a big meditator and everything, but as you get more into the spiritual,
Not,
Yeah,
not quite what you are.
but like I said, the ultimate premise is that we're all one, that we are one, and it's about finding that connection to ourselves, the other people around us, to make us actually remember that is the case. And from a science perspective, I want to bring it back to this because I'm also quite science minded, and so I find that this helps explain it from a scientific perspective. But have you heard of this concept called quantum entanglement before?
Quantum entanglement. No.
Quantum entanglement. So Einstein nicknamed it spooky action at a distance. In quantum mechanics, so there's two main fields of physics that have developed over the last 100 years. One was theory of relativity, general relativity, and special relativity. Special relativity is all to do with speed of light, time, space, all being the same thing. General theory to do with gravity and everything. But the other field that was almost in direct conflict with that, which Einstein didn't really like too much, although he had a hand in developing, was quantum theory. So quantum is the theory of things very, very small. And things get very weird when you start going deep into them. And what quantum entanglement is this. Effectively, what it says is that when you've got two things that were once part of the same system, they're forever connected. And they've been able to prove this. So let's say, for argument's sake, you had, let's say, two atoms or two golf balls, for the sake of argument, two golf balls, right? But these are represented.
Keep it simple so we can all follow along.
Yeah.
Mr. Astrophysics guy, that's okay.
So let's say we've got two golf balls, which actually represent two microscopic particles. And we take them 2 meters apart. Well, actually, let's say we take them 2 miles apart, right? You've got one golf ball on one hill and I've got the other golf ball on the other hill, all right? And let's say there's an arrow on those golf balls, both of them pointing up, all right? Now, if I turn my golf ball so the arrow points downwards and you see me, and the idea is you match me, you will turn your golf ball down, right? The arrow down. Now, for you to be able to do that, let's say you've got some binoculars so you can see me, you're not going to do it exactly the same time because you have to see me do it. And that takes time for that information to get to you. And that time period is the speed of light because you have to see me. Now, what this theory, and actually has been proven in a lab, shows that actually both you and you instinctively know that I'm going to turn that arrow downwards or to the left or to the right. You don't actually have to wait for that information to come. And that, it doesn't matter whether those mountains are 2 miles apart, 2 million miles apart, or one mountain on one end of the universe and the other mountain on the other end of the universe. Instinctively, both arrows are going to point down or left or right without any time delay whatsoever, which by current physics thinking is impossible because it takes time for something for information to get somewhere, usually the speed of light, or it could be the speed of sound if you're hearing my voice or whatever. But speed of light is the speed limit of the universe as we understand it. And because these two golf balls were once, let's say, in the same packet, right? You bought them from the same shop at the same time, they're intrinsically forever linked. This is what's quantum entanglement, which means that those particles are linked. Now, if you believe, which is the current prevailing theory of the Big Bang theory, I don't know for sure if I believe this or not right now, but let's say the Big Bang theory is the theory that everything in the universe spewed out from one singular point. That means everything in the universe started as once in the same system, right? Every golf ball in the universe was once in the same packet of golf balls. And they are now at far ends of the universe, which means they are all intrinsically connected.
I'm going to ask a question because it brings up there's a study done, and probably people have watched this, and it's a bit more fun. Because I think I don't know if anyone listening to this hasn't felt this moment. The sixth sense, the idea that you know when someone's watching you. And actually, I don't know if you've seen it. There's a video YouTube study of this where people are going up and down escalators. Behind the wall, there's a group of people staring at the people. And as they got the escalators, people keep turning around because they feel like they're being watched, but there's no one there to see. It's that innate feeling of connectedness where you feel at some. It feels to me that's maybe that's an example of what you're talking about or not. But it came into my head when you were talking. It's like
it's similar
some
to
kind of connection somewhere because you're not seeing it, you're feeling it in your body.
Or you're thinking of someone and then suddenly they call you. And I had this experience not that long ago, even with booking my holiday, right? So I'm booking this holiday and I text my mate, Trevor, who I don't know if he listens to this or not. I said to him, hey, I'm going here next week. Do you fancy coming? Because I know he's into these sorts of holidays. And bear in mind, this company that I'm going with, Mark Warner, they've got about 7 or 8 of these around Turkey and Greece. And he texts me back and says, actually, I'm there at the moment. And it's at the same exact same resort that I'm going to. And you could say, well, okay, the chances are a bit smaller than that. But the point is that, you know, when you've had that experience where you're thinking of someone, they call you, or you feel someone staring at you behind you, that is, we are all connected. And I think as you get deeper into spirituality, you start to realize it.
I quickly had a look up for the quote that I was trying to find from Sydney Banks about love. I didn't quite find it, but it did find another one that's quite interesting, where he says, "We are one with no separation except for the illusion we have of our own bodies." We're all one except for the illusion we have of our own bodies. And the illusion he's talking about is relating to our thought, because there's no human being more spiritual than you or I. The idea that everybody is equal, we're all energy that's moving from one space to another, never goes, as per Newton's law. So therefore, you, as anyone listening to this, is as good as anybody else on this earth. No one is better. Everything else is layered. We have a social perception that people are better because of their achievement, but no one is innately better than another individual in terms of the way that we are. It's just the way that we act and the way that we behave that alters that. So the only reason we don't see it, therefore, is then it's due to our thoughts. But I love the idea of, as he says, he's not talking about energy. He's not talking about the connections necessarily in that example. We are one. His quote is, we are one with no separation except the illusion we have of our bodies. And what I thought was also interesting, we got talking about this at the end of the last show, and I think I may have even mentioned it in the show, and I probably butchered it slightly, but we're talking about this going back. There's loads of studies now on neuroscience and how it links to anxiety. We know that, we talked about it leads to longevity in your life. You have good connection. We know that low connection, actually, there's studies have shown there's more inflammation in the body for those that have low connection, but there's more, anxiety, more depression, higher suicidal risk, all these things that come with a lack of connection. But actually, there's a Chinese proverb which would have gone back years and years and years ago, which I may have mentioned before, but I love it. It says, if you want happiness for an hour, take a nap. If you want happiness for a day, go fish. If you want happiness for a year, inherit a fortune. And if you want happiness for a lifetime, help someone else. Now, one reason I want to mention that is, that links to connection, but it's not, we can talk about connection to a blue in the face and the fact that there are energies that go from one to the other, that we are innately all connected. But actually, to feel true connection, it's not, we have it on a molecular level, which you're talking about in astrophysics and that. But we also, to break the loneliness trap, it's not enough just to know that we're connected. No. Actually, in order to really build the benefits that come with it, the longevity, the stronger immune system, and everything else, we have to know that other people really care about us and are there for us, that we have relationships based on vulnerability, on empathy, on trust, that there is an overall sense of care from somebody else about how we are feeling about our personal well-being. And I think, so I just think there's 2 levels to this. There's one which we are definitely connected molecularly, but there's also, in terms of improving our well-being, we need to actually show that we care about others and build on that important connection piece. Well,
what I want to say is, it's so funny you talk about showing you care to other people and things like that, because actually in the mentoring group that I was doing an hour before this podcast, the topic of conversation was around service and giving yourself to others, and actually this plays a part of the beat model, right? This is the PSPC part, right? Passion, service, purpose, and connection within the activity part of the beat model. Because one of the things that I do probably for the last 12 years, on day before Christmas Eve, there's this thing called Basket Brigade. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or not. And this is actually how I got into this group called the Yes Group. Before I'd even gone to the Yes Group, which was a personal development group that I was part of for a number of years, still am part of, and actually led it for a few years, was this thing called Basket Brigade. And hundreds of volunteers, they get together and we go and we hire a school out. The school loans us their building on the 23rd of December, the day before Christmas Eve. And we go there and we have been fundraising throughout the year, and we have bought loads and loads of food that is going to create hundreds, if not sometimes 1,000 or 2,000 baskets of food, hampers for underprivileged people across London. And they do basket brigades in different cities across the world. And it started from Tony Robbins many, many years ago. And you put in the chicken or the turkey or the vegan option, and then the carrots and the pudding and everything. And the first half of the day, everyone's listening to Christmas music. There's banter, there's people on stage, and then there's a whole system. It's really organized. I should share a video with you. And you do all that. And then in the second part, what you do is you go and get 4 or 5 hampers, you go in your car and you have different addresses that you're given, and you go across London and you start delivering these hampers, and you knock on the door. Often they answer, sometimes they don't, but they answer the door if they're in, and you just leave the hamper and you're the messenger. You don't tell them what it's about. You say, I'm the messenger, here it is. And then they open it up eventually, and then there's a note in there and it says, Merry Christmas, and once you maybe get back on your feet, this is where this came from. And some people then join the following year. And so it's all about showing people, and we do that at Christmas time, but we should do it year round, is showing people that we care, creating this idea of community and connection and service and charity and volunteering. And and by doing that, that's what triggered in my head. I was thinking, like, even when I'm feeling really tired and low, when I do something for other people, I always feel more energy. And that's why it actually ended up being part of
We can get it from watching those YouTube videos, right? There's loads of videos out there about random acts of kindness, people that give a blanket to a stranger, and if you watch it, it makes us feel warm and fuzzy inside.
Oh, yeah.
Because of how it makes us feel. So there was a Harvard study done where they named what that warm, fuzzy feeling is. A guy called Nicholas Christakis, and I looked at this pre-show, which is why it comes into mind now. So we have that warm, fuzzy feeling, right? And we want to push it on. But Nicholas managed to, at Harvard, study to show that actually if one person acts with compassion, it can build compassion in people up to 3 degrees of separation from ourselves. So if I'm a naturally more compassionate person, the study that he did at Harvard showed that it means my wife, my friends, my neighbors, my siblings are likely to be more compassionate as well. And there's also studies that show the same is true for happiness. And obviously compassion often leads to happiness. We show compassion for others, it makes us feel better inside. What I thought was really interesting in the study, and I'll put a link in the show notes, was that the study showed that it's not just us. And this links to your connection piece as well. If you and I are together on the street and I do something and you see it, it's going to likely to make you more compassionate, and the person you're with up to 3 degrees of separation. Wow, that's amazing.
I mean, this is not to do with compassion, but like there's a weight loss thing where it shows like if your friend's friend is overweight, you're like 25% more likely to be overweight and things like that. I think it was Dr. David Hamilton. I really recommend his books, by the way. David Hamilton, PhD. He's got some great books. I'll have to dig out a few for you specifically, but he was talking about this, and we are so connected. One thing I wanted to say actually, one on the videos that make you feel happy. I was watching one today, and there was kids playing basketball, probably about 7, 8 years old, that sort of age group. And there was one kid who was not really able to do much, or maybe I think he had an illness or something, and the other kids were like shooting in. And then there was this other guy who was like the biggest kid in the group. And I remember the tag said something like be in life, be number 50, and he was wearing number 50. And what he did is he grabbed the ball, or the kid grabbed the ball, and he stood behind him and held him with his hands, and then helped him get the ball in or something like that. And it was just such an emotional bit for me, like a 2-minute thing. I was like, oh my god, like 7 years old, and you're thinking like that for other people.
There's a famous Iron Man video of a guy, and I'll put the link in it because it'll literally make you cry. Does for me anyway. It brings emotions out of us. Where the dad takes his special needs son through an entire Iron Man race. He pulls him in the water. You may have seen it.
I've seen this one.
And he runs with him. It is a real tearjerker. He does the whole Iron Man with his, and the expression of his son as he crosses the finish line for all the special needs he has to deal with. I mean, it just breaks you down. But it breaks us down as people watch.
I'm welling up now thinking about it.
You know which one I'm talking about. I'll definitely find a link and put it in. Yeah. So, I mean, even going back to the Spanish proverb, right, where they talk about helping someone else is if you want happiness for a lifetime. We're seeing many, many, many more now, very successful entrepreneurs, billionaires, millionaires, whatever it might be, that when they actually make their fortunes, they realize it hasn't quite given them the full-time happiness they thought it would come. So they become much more philanthropic as they make their fortunes. I interviewed a guy on a payroll podcast that I've got. It's called Payroll Podcast. Not that I need to plug it on this show unless you work on payroll. There's a guy called Steven Sarowitz, who is a billionaire, one of the first payroll billionaires. It's a big business in the US. And interviewing him, and he is a billionaire, so you don't get a chance to speak to these people very often, right? And his whole philosophy now, he's actually of the Baha'i faith, which I thought was really interesting. And he's become very spiritual since making his fortune and everything else. But his ambition is to leave over $1 billion, or to pledge over £1 billion to philanthropic causes. And that's what gives him happiness now. It's not about the money he's making, it's about what he's giving to others. And he's one example, but there are many out there.
It's
Actually,
Warren Buffett who's developed the Giving Pledge. You know, the Giving Pledge where donate 99% of their wealth. And one of the things that reminds me, I think it's Andrew Carnegie. Have you heard of Andrew Carnegie? He's like the steel magnate of the 1800s or something. And I think it was his philosophy. It's like spend the first half of your life making money, and he spent the second half of his life wanting to give it away.
Giving it away.
And, you know, love him or loathe him, Bill Gates is doing somewhat similar like that. I've got my own views on him in particular, but his mentor, if you like, was Warren Buffett, and Warren Buffett is the one that started off the Giving Pledge, I believe. But they're all off the same ilk of like the Andrew Carnegies and all this, where they are building their fortune and then maybe giving it away. We'll see if it's truly philanthropic or not. But that's the idea, I guess.
There will be people listening to this that are feeling lonely. And if you base it on the American studies that have come out, I think it was after the pandemic in 21, it says 61% of all young adults were struggling with loneliness. 51% of mothers with children struggling with loneliness, of which 50% said, and as you can find the study online, said they wish someone would just ask them how they're doing in a meaningful, genuine way. That's the difference. That's the icing there. Yeah. People need to understand. It's not about saying you're okay. It's, you know, if this show now, and funnily enough, someone did this for me. So we talked about connection and social media, one of the other shows, and I said actually it can make you feel really disconnected being on social media. That was a quote I was talking about and how it makes me feel. And it was really lovely. And the listener listens to this, listens to the show, literally got in touch with me and said, Nick, I'm just reaching out to you to let you know, haven't seen you much on social. I'm always here if you want to feel connected. A really lovely touch. But you know, if we can inspire people to just pick up the phone and actually make that connection again for the people we haven't connected with recently, because it means so much to both the giver and the receiver, right?
Well, yeah, and how you feel, other people feel. And what I wanted to bring up a little while back, I can't remember that guy you were quoting where he was talking about no distance between us. Or what were you talking?
That's Sydney Banks.
Sydney Banks. And I wanted to say that you might have heard in a yoga session often at the end, a teacher might say namaste. And so effectively what that means, loose translation, all of these things, but the light within me recognizes the light within you, and that there is no distance or space between us. And effectively what that namaste is saying is that we're all the same, and that we're all connected, and we're all the same thing, which I really like. And I probably didn't know what that meant for many years after hearing it. And so that's why I thought I'd share that now. But I also wanted to say that the reason we're so connected, and again, bringing it back to from a science perspective, because a lot of times people might hear, oh, it's all airy-fairy, this, that, and the other. Okay, we're all one, we're all connected, whatever. It's not. And this is what I'm saying, is that science is proving what these spiritual leaders have known for a long time. And kind of going back to that quantum physics part of thing, there's this thing called the double slit experiment, which I wanted to share with you.
Double what? A double slit?
Double slit. So imagine you've got like a piece of paper with a slit in it.
Okay.
Or let's say it's a metal sheet with
a new one to me. Yeah, cool, got it.
So there's a metal sheet with one slit in it. Now, let's say you were to fire marbles at that slit. Some are going to hit the metal bit, and some are going to go through the gap. And let's say there's another wall on the other side. Let's say actually it's a paintball or something like that, because that'll be easier. Paintball pellets. And it will make a strip where it's gone through, where it's hitting, right? Now, if you had two slits, you would end up with shooting those pellets two strips on the back wall, right? Because some pellets are going through the left-hand slit, some pellets are going through the right-hand slit. You end up with two slits on the back wall. If instead of pellets of paintball pellets, you had water going through, what happens is as each wave, as the wave goes through the two slits, it creates two ripples, like two semicircle ripples. When the two crests of the wave meet, it creates an interference pattern, which makes things higher. When the two troughs of the wave meet, it creates a pattern, makes it lower. And what that means is on the back wall, what you see is not two slits, two markings. You see a whole stream of markings because of the way that the wave has protruded outwards. And I will share with you afterwards, Nick, a link to a YouTube video that we can put in the show notes so people can watch. But effectively, what this is saying is, when a wave passes through those two slits, you get an interference pattern, right? Like 10 or 12 vertical strips. When a particle passes through those two slits, you get just two lines. Right?
Yep.
Now, what they did is when you go microscopic, right? And you go microscopic to like an electron instead of a marble, you go down to an electron level, and they fire these electrons at this double slit. They see on the back wall not two slits, not two markings, they see the whole gamut of markings, the whole lot, like it's behaving like a wave. So what they thought, okay, well, maybe we're firing all these electrons too quickly and they're interfering with each other somehow. So they would fire them one at a time, one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. And they're still seeing this wave pattern. So then they're like, hang on a second, we're firing particles, like little marbles, at this thing, and we should see two patterns, but we're seeing 12 across. That doesn't make any sense. And the maths is even weirder as well. The maths shows that the particle goes through one, it goes through the other, it goes through both, and it goes through neither. Gets really complicated with the maths. Then they thought, hang on a second, let's be a bit cleverer. Let's find out what the hell is actually going on here. So let's put a little microscopic camera so we can see what is actually happening. And when they put the camera there to look at what's going on, then the pattern they get is back to the two lines. When they take the camera away, the experiment behaves like a wave. When they look at it, it behaves like a particle. This is called wave-particle duality of light, effectively. Us, being the observer, is actually affecting the result of the experiment. When we look at it, you get two lines. When we don't look at it, we get a wave pattern interference. And
sounds like a naughty child, that when they're in your view, they're really well behaved, you turn away, they're messing around.
This is what I'm trying to say, is that we inherently know that we, as an observer, are not actually independent. We're not independent, because this is why we have placebo-controlled trials, double-blind placebo-controlled trials, because double-blind means that the person giving the pill doesn't know whether it's placebo or not, because you might give little tells away through your demeanor, whatever. Or when we talked about this last time, when you go to a football match that is played behind closed doors will probably yield, between the two same teams, might yield a different result than a football match played.
Interestingly, on that, just because I know we talked about the book by Simon Ong, Energize, and actually one of our listeners bought the book and posted it on LinkedIn and said she really enjoyed it. That was good. I'm glad to listen for that. We probably saw it. But in that book, he talks about, and I'm going to get the name wrong because it was on the book, but I'll just give a broad example. And I can't even fully remember exactly what the ailment was. I think it was onset, maybe onset dementia or something along those lines.
Early onset dementia.
Maybe more physical. I mentioned it before. But he was desperate to got quite depressed, trying to find a solution to his problem. Traditional science and medication wasn't working. They said, look, it's irreversible. But he found out about this new study that was going on rats, and it was to reverse this dementia. He then went to try and become one of the people in this research study, and was successful. And he got the drug and went back to the doctors, and he realized that this drug was amazing. Like, it was doing everything they said it was. Fantastic. The doctors were like, this is amazing. Like, you are defying science. This shouldn't be happening. And he was able to live a very normal life, and none of the symptoms that should have impacted came through, right? But then he went back and said, I think it was about 10 years later in the book, and apologies, I'm probably getting the numbers wrong. It doesn't really matter. He went back to see the results of the final study with the rats. It turned out it didn't work. And then he found out he was in a placebo study anyway. The whole drug he'd ever got the whole time was placebo. Yeah. How the mind had obviously impacted him so much. He was able to overcome it himself, his ailment the doctor said wasn't possible. I mean, there's a brilliant book called Cured, actually, which talks about many different things.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I mean, there's a similar one called Mind Over Medicine by Dr.
I know that book as well. Yeah.
You know that one? Brilliant book. Love that book.
I think you recommended it, actually.
Yeah, I probably did, actually. I might have recommended it. And most trials do not work, do not outperform placebo. You know, my whole life is called the thought gym, because I know the power of the mind. Sure. And I talk to people as well about the nocebo effect as well, because it's the opposite, where a doctor tells you, oh, you know, you've got 6 months left to live, and then people bang on die, even though they've read the wrong chart and it was nothing to do with you. And this is why, like, witch doctors in, you know, these crazy tribes might work, because, you know, you have so much faith in that witch doctor, they tell you something's going to happen, it happens.
We're in that weird dynamic at the minute, right? So my dad, who listens to the show, like, he was given 6 months, then 18 months. That was over 2 years ago. Still with us. We're hanging on strong. We don't know what that date's going to be. He's got terminal cancer, but you know, I almost felt like the doctors did it to prepare us for the worst, to get us used to it. And then when everything now was just good news, it was almost like, let's make it really bad, so then they all feel positive. But
doctors do not have a crystal ball. They do not
We're
have a
just
crystal
giving him
ball.
loads of things to look forward to. We've got a party celebration in August. He's got, as I mentioned earlier, 50th
Yeah.
wedding anniversary in January. I think the brain and the body can really, I know we're coming away from connection now, but the idea of having something to look forward to has
Yeah.
such a profound impact on our health and our well-being.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, doctors do their best, but they're not fortune tellers, and they're basing a lot of their assessment on averages, historic, whatever. I mean, saying my brother-in-law's mum, she was given maybe a few weeks left to live, and that was like 18 months ago. And they're not crystal. They don't have crystal balls. And
You know what it
one
has done,
thing, should they even tell people this if they don't know? But then you could say, well, you have to know to get your affairs in order.
but let's make it relevant to today's conversation. It was really interesting. I told you what we did on Saturday, which we went home for family, my dad's birthday, right? So 73rd birthday, but the whole family went. And the connections now, like, we're valuing that way more than perhaps we may have done, because we know that the time we've got left is finite, right? And we know that with everybody. There's one certainty in life, is that we've got death. But when we know it's potentially a bit closer than we want it to be, it's amazing how much the family pull together. And if they listen to this, it probably isn't, but if my sister listens to this, I know it's strengthened my relationship with both my sisters. I believe it's probably strengthened my relationship with my brother, which is a real positive outcome of actually a terrible situation. But it's when these kind of situations can bring the sense of community together, the sense of family together, right? And there are always positives in these situations. And I think that's a really, really positive one, because it's brought everyone together. It's made us all a bit more compassionate, a bit more empathetic, a little bit more understanding, a little bit more patient.
And I mean, keeping it on the connection piece is that, because obviously the family is an obvious example, right? You're super connected to the people around, right? The actions that you take are going to affect other people. Or if someone like dies, it clearly affects massive amounts of people. We're all connected on an emotional level, a spiritual level, an esoteric level. And I think that most problems stem from the fact that we don't really know that. We know that, but we don't know it.
Look at mental health in teenagers and children, right? Where they're trying to socially conform. They're trying to build their connections. They're trying to be more popular, in inverted commas. So they make decisions about their bodies or their mental health or whatever it might be in order to be seen, in inverted commas, to be doing the right things, to be higher achievers, to have more friends, more social, whatever it is. We do these things because we seek that connection, sometimes in the wrong ways, right? But it has such a profound impact on the way that we manage our lives, that need to want to be accepted and need to want to have more connection, because the connection we think mean, if you have lots of it, 1,000 friends on Facebook, it means we'll have X, Y, and Z. But it's really about whether someone truly values how you're feeling and truly cares. That's what we really earn.
Well, this is why I really like the idea of, and I would love it. I remember years and years ago, I went on this meditation retreat. It was probably the most intense thing I've done. And I've done some intense things in the past. It's called Vipassana. Yeah, it's called Vipassana. It's a 10-day meditation retreat where you're not allowed to talk. You're not allowed to make eye contact with anyone.
I think this is the one I was thinking of, actually. Yeah.
You don't eat after midday. You wake up at 4 a.m. You start meditating from about 4 a.m. On and off, you're doing about 12 hours of meditation a day. The first 3 days, you're focusing just on the sensations around your nose. But every day I wanted to quit, but I knew that I wouldn't, because I went in there saying, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do the 10 days. But around day 8, I had probably the most spiritual experience there, because you get to a point where you're scanning your body and you're actually able to almost sense the atoms in your body. But you start to, or I started at that point, not to go too much into it, but just to have this experience, this almost out of body experience. But what I wanted to say is that once people really know and know it emphatically in their system that they're connected, it is a very different approach to how you live your life. And to get to it an easier way, I was thinking, I think we talked about flotation tanks before, and the point of the flotation tank being the temperature's the same water, there's total blackness, and you can't tell where your skin ends and the rest of the world begins. And it's this idea of dissolving the body, dissolving the ego, to this idea that you're connected to everyone. Plant medicines, we should do a different talk about plant medicines. I'm not sure how familiar you are with them, but I've had a couple of experiences. But one where you take a substance and it's like your body has dissolved. There is nothingness there, and you are somehow here, there, and everywhere all at once. Whether that is imagination, I don't think so, because a lot of people have similar experiences, or whether that's because our human brain works the same way for everyone, and that's why we all get that experience. But a lot of people who have these even near-death experiences or these spiritual experiences, they talk similar about this idea of feeling at one, of feeling connected. And even though I've had some experiences like that, I still live in the real world. So I still feel, irritated by the person that cuts me off in traffic, and, want to look after my family more than other people's maybe, or
when
whatever.
We're well, we have loads and loads of wishes and goals. When we're ill, we only have one.
Yeah.
It was interesting you mentioned ego. It's famous because ego is always front and center when we talk about anything to do with coaching or our sense of self. The ego is one of the things that gets in the way. And one of the first things we learn when we become, follow the executive coaching and mentoring courses is you need to leave ego at the door. Easier said than done, right? For a lot of people, because ego is something that we tend to adopt and care about. But City Bank says ego is only what you think you are and what you think of life. Nothing more, nothing less. That's kind of where I was thinking you were going with the flotation tanks. It's that feeling of just freeing the mind of all negativity, freeing the mind of all the things, just letting yourself float and be at one. That's the connectedness with nature, connectedness with the water, connectedness with self.
Well, because there's no issues there. There's no issues when you realize your true nature, I guess, and I guess I'm definitely edging this conversation more to kind of the spiritual realm.
Well, let me take out the spiritual. Not a great example, and you know this story, but the listeners, or some of the listeners won't. And this is a genuinely true. You may not believe it because of the odds of this, right? Absolutely true. I'm kind of giving away what happens early by telling you that at the start. But one of those moments where I looked out and I had to phone my dad immediately to my connection and tell him what just happened, because I had to speak to it's funny who you call upon straight away when you've got something really important to tell. Straight on the phone to my dad to tell him. This was the story. So I went to a stag do in Prague. I went to a stag do in Prague for a friend of mine who lived in Singapore, was getting married. Now, he had loads of friends going to the stag do in Prague. I was living in the UK, in Kent at the time. And the only person I really knew at the stag do was him. And I met him at university in Devon. Right? This will all come to parents. We're in Prague. People from all walks of life are out there in a location that none of us had met before. And we're sat at the dinner table. And I was sat, this would have been 15 years ago. The guy next to me was probably in his 50s. And you do the old standard, what's your name? Where are you from? How do you know Andy, the groom? If he's listening to this, Andy Martin. And he said, I can't actually remember his name. But he said, I'm from Salisbury, which was my hometown. So I grew up. I said, And for those who listen to previous episodes will know I got the crap kicked out of me when I was 17 in Salisbury Underground car park, right? That's where I grew up. But Salisbury, that's where I'm from. I said, whereabouts in Salisbury? I might know. And he goes, well, actually, I was in a village just outside Salisbury called Woodford. I said, I know Woodford really well because my mum used to run Woodford Nursery School, and that was in Middle Woodford. He said, well, if you know the Woodfords, he said, I was in Lower Woodford. I said, I know Lower Woodford really well. I used to come through Lower Woodford to get to the nursery school. So I said, I was Stratford Castle. For those, you don't need to have Woodford geography, but that's just outside Lower Woodford. And he said, you would have come past my house. He said, I used to live between Stratford Castle and between Lower Woodford, and there's a group of houses. And I said, I know exactly the houses that you mean. I said, what was the name of your house? And he said, Carrier's Crossing, my house. The guy was 30 years older, met him in Prague, sat next to him in a restaurant at my friend's stag do, who was from Singapore. And two people before me used to live and grew up in the house that I was now living, or my parents now lived in. And it was like, I don't know how many houses there are in the world, but I know there's 7 or 8 billion people.
Yeah.
It was just that spooky moment of understanding. And there's loads, you speak to people like this story, which I have done many times. It's probably the weirdest thing I've come across. But every person to a man or to a woman will say, funnily enough, I have a similar story. There's so many stories out there of connectedness. You've met someone on a random island in the jungle of Nepal.
I guess we explain this all, but like say small world. Whenever this happens, go small world, right? You're halfway around the world, and you meet someone from your hometown, and you think, okay, and the skeptics and Muslims might say, well, is it really that random? If you're like on a backpacker trail there, you're going to meet someone eventually. But at the same time, yes, there is.
I mean, the same house, just like. My mind.
And think about the internet, right? Why is social media so popular, right? Because it's bringing a connection of some sort. Like we've argued about whether social media really brings connection, but let's think from an internet perspective. The whole point of the internet in the first place, when it was developed in 1979 or whenever it was so that people didn't have to like take the floppy disk from one end of the university to the other, and it was to create a connected network. So that there could be communication between two nodes, right? We are the nodes, us humans are the nodes, right? First it was the telephone, then it was now the internet and everything else. And so there's this strive to be connected. But I think that what we don't recognize as we start to do this is, and my feeling is this, that all the technology that we eventually build is doing things that we inherently can do without the technology. We can go a bit more into what that might mean in a future episode, but I feel like that's what we're doing, is we're trying to create an interconnected world. And eventually, you know, when they start to put chips into backs of people's heads and the internet in your brain and Neuralink and all of that, it's to create this hive mind, to put it into the Borg Star Trek universe of things.
But we want to be careful with that, because as we talked about social media before, the more we try and be a forced connection, the more we can feel disconnected from things. You know, that we know that loneliness is on the rise despite all the tools we've got at disposal.
This is why,
despite these tools making us more connected, we feel more lonely than ever. We're too busy, in inverted commas, to have a social life, or we need to be more attractive, or we need to achieve more before we can go out and socialize with those people. There's all that social challenge and pressure that stops us from
this is the thing, to do your quote that you've quoted to me many times that I really like, which wasn't your quote, but someone else's. I don't remember whose.
Every quote someone else's.
But where you say, you know, the person that looks out dreams, the person that looks within awakens. And I think right now we're looking out, right? We're building these Neuralinks and we're building this connection. Suddenly the internet's going to be in your head and in your sleeve and whatever else. But actually, if people looked within, and there's a program through Google called, I think, Search Inside, or Search Inside Yourself. It's a mindfulness program.
M People song. You got
maybe,
to search for
maybe. But it's a mindfulness program that Google operate, and it's about searching within. And I think that if people did search within, if they spent more time in that inner space instead of that outer space with social media and everything else, you'll realize that you may not need those things as much. And actually that a lot of what we can do, and when you get really deep into it, people have these ideas that they feel connected very rarely with other people, maybe in meditating opposite sides of the world, or, you know, lucid dreamers can sometimes do some crazy things. So I just feel like if we do that, we're going to start to realize our connectedness to one another on a more...
You know, we talked about energy being constant. Well, you and I give each other energy through these shows while we do them, right? If we didn't enjoy it, we wouldn't do it. That's pretty simple. When we speak to people on the phone, if it's our mum or dad, and you want to call and give good news, it gives us energy, it gives them energy as the recipient. You know, if people picked up the phone and spoke to people, or went around my house and knocked on the door and spoke to people and met people face to face as a result of this episode, I can guarantee you, if it's someone that means something to you and you have a connection at a deep level, you'll gain positive energy from it. You'll feel good for it, but so will the recipient of that. And potentially, as the studies show, so will three people 3 degrees away from you feel that.
Because we're all connected, right? So what's good for the system, and this is what mycelial networks, right? Mushrooms, and when mushrooms in one part of the forest are lacking nutrients, they have their nutrients diverted from mushrooms miles away. There's a whole...
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a whole connection there, because nature cares
for the butterfly. And the butterfly effect is something we all know about, right? And that's, again, connections.
Yeah, exactly. It's that's the thing. The butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil and makes a tornado somewhere else. But this is the thing, and we kind of realize it, but we don't kind of realize it. It's like, so yeah, I don't know. That's kind of all I've got to say on that at the moment. I think
I'll say so. So in my research, it was quite interesting, and it doesn't really link to connectedness, but it does link to compassion and our true natures, shall we say. There was a study I came across called the Economic Game Paradigm Study. I don't know if you've come across it. Really interesting, obviously based on economics and money and power and those kind of things. And we talked earlier about how, you know, people, when they've made their fortunes, often want to give their money away. But the study, in the study, people were given a certain amount of money, but they were given the money and they had to act immediately in what they would do with that money in a group situation. They could act fairly and share it with the other participants, or they could keep it for themselves. Really interesting was when they were given no time to think about it, nearly everyone in that study chose to share. It was only when they were given time to think, which means it's no longer innate, it's something where our thoughts get in the way, our feelings and everything else, that they started to change their minds. But the innate decision was always to share. And that, for me, links back to that compassion. What's our true nature is to be connected. And I thought you probably have more knowledge than I do on this because you study it in more detail. But I was really interested to find out that those with low feelings of connection, feeling lonely, actually have more inflammation in the body. So it impacts us physiologically as well. It's not just the feeling we have in our minds, we have inflammation in the body as well. Yeah, well, yeah, for sure.
That's it. And stress breeds information. I mean, ultimately, most ailments are stress related in some way, shape, or form, right? The food stresses you, the exercise can stress you, the situation stresses you. But if you feel your true nature, which is that to be connected, then and we have these sayings. Remember these sayings, right? A problem shared is a problem halved, right? We have these sayings, and we don't really pay attention to them because we think, oh, it's just a saying. But like, as you've mentioned before, when you hear a cliche, you pay attention. But when you share that problem, it's lowered, right? So therefore, your stress is lowered. So those people that feel connected to people are having better ideas, better ways of communicating their issues with people. This is why I like certain communities where was I the other day? And I can't remember, it might have been like an old I was driving past somewhere, it was like an old man's cafe type place where all these old people, they just go and they sit, they have their coffee. A lot of this happens in Greece a lot of the time, where they have these gaffanias and they're all these.
You get them in greasy spoons in the UK as well. Certainly,
yeah. But
those have been to Landudno.
I suppose they go and they leave again. These things they're there for like 6 or 8 hours, and they're just chatting. And I was at the barber's the other day, and it's the same thing. And it's this idea of chatting and being able to effectively, almost like what we would call therapy, right? Which is interesting actually, because now, like say in the States, is a bit more popular than in the UK. But because we are in these isolated 1-bedroom apartments here, there, and everywhere, we don't have that connection with other people to study these issues. Whereas before, we would have more of that community to be able to share those issues. And
I think the sad thing is when you feel disconnected, it makes it really hard. Actually, the reverse is also true. But when you're in that 1-bedroom apartment, I'm not that I've experienced it, but I've seen others that have, it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle where it's really hard then to come out of it, to pull yourself out. Like anything, we know that vulnerability can be contagious and it makes other people more vulnerable. Well, actually, if you're lonely, it can just make you more lonely and more fearful.
I was there on Saturday, right? We started this conversation talking about being invited to that 40th. So I was sat at home 8 o'clock at night on Saturday, and I was thinking to myself, can I be really that bothered, right? To trek all the way into Liverpool Street, go down there for a couple of hours, and it actually took me like an hour and a half each way, pretty much. And I'm glad I did, because I got there, I saw people I hadn't seen for like 6 years. I saw parents of friends and everything. And I knew that I'd feel better for doing it, but it's so easy not to. And then you go downward spiral. It's hard to pull yourself up. So you've got to catch yourself sometimes and just create a lot of energy to change that momentum.
Positive story is how I met my wife, right? So a friend of mine was doing, my wife went to drama school, and they were doing a final showcase, the final piece you do when the agents come and you get everything else. And he went to university with her. I've never met at this point. And he was going to London. They went to Birmingham School of Speech Drama, and I went to Royal Holloway to do a master's there, so not many miles away. Oh. And he said, I'll come and stay with you. And he said, come and see the show. And I was like, oh, bothered. It's like all the way into London to see like a music. I'm not really into musicals. It was their final showcase. It'll be all you guys celebrating. I won't know anyone except you. He's like, come along. He said, there's a girl here, generally true, that I think you'll get on really well with. Turned out to be my wife now. We've been together 20 years. I didn't know that at the time. And my wife will say, you were just thinking of one thing. And that wasn't the case. I was looking for connection in a different way. Anyway, I was like, you know what? I haven't seen him for a long time. And it probably was the thing that made the difference. Me go, I'll head out. I didn't know her, but I hadn't seen him for a while. And it was the easy decision would definitely have been to stay in. And I would have missed that opportunity to meet now my wife and the kids and come on the back of it. But I went in, saw Dave, which was great. Dave Cutler, his name is, and met Lucy, the girl he mentioned, and we got chatting. It turned out we had a lot in common, and here we are. And I hadn't made that decision to, whether you believe in it or not, or whatever, the decisions we make lead to certain things. Yeah. But I met Lucy on that day, and the easier I in my head, I was resigned to completely saying no. And then I ended up going, you know what? Otherwise, I'm going to sit here in my room. I may as well just go, and I need to see him. I haven't seen him for ages, and it's a good thing to do. And there we are. One
of the sayings that I've got up on my wall in the gym, which I got from a pendant that I had around my neck when I was traveling. I haven't got a tattoo, but for many years I wanted a tattoo, and I was always looking for a phrase. And I've got a few phrases that I'd probably put on that tattoo now. But the phrase, effectively, that I got from a place in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, I think, effectively translates to this: never try, never know. That's it. And I often think about that, and or you've got to be in it to win it, or as Wayne Gretzky says, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And so you know, and I thought this with the holiday as well that I'm booking this week, because I thought, you know what, I don't know if I'm going to like this kind of setup. It's like all inclusive and this and that. But I was like, at the end of the day, you're going to make mistakes in life. You're going to make decisions that you wish you made, but you have to make them, and you have to be okay with making those decisions, because otherwise, if you make no decisions, if you have no experiences, nothing will change and nothing will happen. And so you know that sometimes only one has to work, right? You might have met 1,000 women before you met your wife. It doesn't matter that only one has to work for you to find the right one for you, right?
I'll go back to Matt Damon's About a Zoo. Love that movie.
Oh my God, I was thinking about this thing very.
Wait, you know why? Because it's 20 seconds of courage.
I was literally about to say this.
Must be our connection over the airways, Harry. 20 seconds of bravery. I'll beat you to it.
I need to tell you this story then. I need to tell you this like this.
Because well, before you do, because I don't know if people know that, but if you don't know the movie, which actually is based on the zoo.
I'll explain it as part of the story. I'll explain it as part of the story.
Go for it.
Because the thing is, when you were telling that story about meeting Lucy, I was thinking back to when I met an ex-girlfriend of mine, and how you can trace back all the little steps. Now, I was at an event probably 12 years ago where I had first saw her, and I kind of was really attracted to her, but I'd never met her, but I just saw her and I felt there was this energy or this aura.
Yeah.
About a week before that, I saw not the whole movie, right? So there's a movie but with Matt Damon called We Bought a Zoo. Yeah. Now, in that movie, so I'm explaining it to the listeners, in that movie, Matt Damon is a widower. And like I said, I didn't actually watch the movie prior to this, but I watched about 5 minutes of it, 10 minutes of it. And he's a widower. He's got a couple of kids. They buy a zoo for one reason or another. But he's taking these kids to this cafe or this diner, and he's explaining to him, to his son, I think, or to both of them, like how he met the mother, and that she was sat at the table, and he was sat at another table, and he was umming and ahhing about whether he needed to go up to it. And I think he was recounting that his brother had told him this or something like that. But either way, his brother or someone had said, you don't need to be brave. You just need 20 seconds of bravery.
You don't have to have all the answers. You don't need to know.
You don't have to have all the answers. You just need 20 seconds of bravery. And it's that 20-second walk to the table. And then ended up, he married that woman and everything. But how it fits in with what I was going to talk about, which is why it was funny when you were talking about Lucy, is that at this event, so it was one of these personal development events, and we'd just done like this arrow breaking thing. So you put an arrow against your throat effectively, and you have to like walk into it and snap the arrow. And I was in a group, and everyone's cheering, everyone's done the arrow, and there's probably 5, 6, 7, 8, 1,000, 800 or 1,000 people at this event. So there's lots of groups of about 10 people all doing these arrow breaks. Now, this girl wasn't in my group, but as I did the arrow break, everyone was celebrating. And ironically enough, I went to that event because I quite like this other girl who was in my group, but she ended up getting engaged at that arrow break. That
went well.
But I saw this other girl in the corner of my eye. And as I saw her, I was like, my head was going, do I talk to her? Do I not? Blah, blah, blah. And I remembered that zoo.
20 seconds of bravery.
And I thought 20 seconds of bravery. And I've thought about that many times. And I did the 20 seconds of bravery. I walked up to it. We ended up getting on, going out for like 4 years, living together and so on. And it was like 20 seconds. And as you were saying that story, I was thinking about a zoo, but I was thinking that's so obscure as a thing.
Yes, We Bought a Zoo. That's what it's called. We Bought a Zoo. The zoo is around the corner from where I live. We've been to
really? As you were saying that story,
American movie.
That was what was going through my head. And again, talking about that connection where even though we're separated through hundreds of miles, I think we were connected in that story.
I think we probably were, mate. Yeah, there you go. If someone could take it away, if you're not sure about something you want to do and you're listening to this, like, you don't have to be brave for the whole speech, you don't have to be brave for the whole ordeal, the whole meeting. You just need to be brave for the first 20 seconds, and the rest will come naturally.
And actually, in the end, I did watch that movie probably about 2 or 3 years ago. I ended up watching the whole thing, I think, eventually.
Good movie. Actually, interestingly, I'm conscious of time, but there's something that popped into my head when you were talking. I won't get the numbers right, because it's a study I heard about 4 or 5 years ago, probably. And you might know it better. You might be better quote what the study was. But really interesting. They put a lot of people, so let's say 50 people into a room. I think it was about 50 people into a room. And 49 of them were actors, and 1 individual was not. And they gave a relatively easy mathematical equation for the group to do. Something like, I don't know, 10 times 12, whatever. And 49 of them submitted that, and the answer was submitted publicly would give an incorrect answer, which made the one person go, yeah, sure, that's wrong. But he ended up changing what he knew was correct, or he or her knew was correct, to go with the majority because there
Yep.
was 49 other people saying, no, you're wrong, it's this, right?
Yeah.
Then reran the study and had just 48 people give the wrong answer and just one give the correct. And not completely, but 50% of people that had this second person of support, and it's that support piece, that connection who gave the right answer, meant that they stuck with their original answer they knew was right. They just needed that one other person to connect with them, tell them, give them that security. And actually, when we're talking about loneliness, and we link that into loneliness, and there's loneliness studies out there, and loads of things out there. For humans, we typically only need one or two people to feel really connected to take us out of what is a loneliness pandemic. So I don't know who that person is for anyone listening to this. If you can identify who those one or two people are in your life, now actually at the end of this episode is the perfect time to pick up the phone, drop an email, ideally go and see them, and just see if you can reinvigorate that connection with that person. A really interesting study. I don't know if you know about it.
I do know that study and several others, and it just goes how we're persuaded by the masses, which actually is an interesting and topic to itself. I'm probably the one person that would defy those because that tends to be what I tend to do. But when you were talking about that, I think you quoted this video before in an earlier episode, but it's one that I used to show in one of my workshops. I call it the first follower. Is the crazy guy in the field dancing and no one's dancing? Have you seen this video? So there's crazy guy, and it's at some sort of festival, and he's dancing and nothing's going on. And then eventually a big crowd ends up coming. But the video that I show it is because it's not the leader that was important, because it was the second person that came and danced with him.
And then everyone else
then gave permission to everybody else to go and dance. And I think I call the video the first follower, but I'm not sure if that's what it's called or not. But it's one we show in some of the workshops. And it's about that first follower is important, not the leader, because you need that first follower to actually allow other people to then jump in and everything. So interesting.
Yeah, and there's when I was at conscious time now, but when I went to university, did my masters, I studied a guy called Guillermo Gomez Pena, who's a Chicano performance artist. What was interesting is he did a show in Leicester Square, and I highlight this because we always think that we wouldn't be so silly or foolish to fall for something like this. And he did a show, and I studied this for my masters and him, and I've actually got to perform with him, which was amazing, at Tate Gallery, which is one of the highlights of my university days. But he did a show years ago with a woman called Coco Fusco. And what he did is he put himself in a cage in the middle of Leicester Square, and they were both naked, but with their privates kind of covered up. And they were acting as if it was kind of a roll up, come and see these people. We've just discovered this new island, this little island off South America, which we didn't know was ever inhabited. Turns out there were people on this island who have never been influenced by Western culture ever. No one's ever kind of inhabited this island before. So therefore, they are completely unique, and they're still doing all these weird and wonderful things because they haven't had any kind of Westernized influence. So you could come up and see them in a cage, act in all their funny ways, and you could pay money to have photographs with them. Obviously, what they were subverting is how they felt as Chicanos and how they were ostracized and marginalized really by others. But you can see the footage online, in the still black and white photos of this, but there were queues of people queuing to watch these two humans in a cage, and very few people questioning the fact that we'd locked up two human beings and were showcasing them for everyone else to see. Because they weren't Westernized, therefore they were looked upon as if they were a subhuman. And as human, I would never fall for that. Well, have a look at the press, because there were loads of people around London queuing up to have a glance at these weird people in cages, and no one thinking to open it.
People always think that they would respond in a certain way until the thing happens, and then they realize actually human nature is pretty predictable in a lot of cases for the majority. And so
but it only takes, if you watch the video, it only takes a couple of people to suddenly go, hey, this is wrong, and suddenly everyone's okay now. It's the opposite of your dancing man, really. But rather than joining the joy, they now suddenly join in with, well, I was going to do that, but they did it first. But you needed someone else to be the protagonist, someone else to sort of start that movement. But,
yeah, definitely. Interesting. Cool.
Anyway, mate,
we've rambled on long enough probably today. Wow, long session. I'm just looking
at the shades back on. I love it. I love how you.
But these aren't my shades. These are actually glasses so I can see. You've been a blur most of the time. So
okay, mate, I've got mine behind me.
These are not my blue light.
I bought these because of you. You encouraged me to buy these. There you go. Next time I see you, buddy, it'd have been back from Greece. I'd have finished, hopefully, complete.
I'll be in Greece, actually, so I need to remember to take my microphone with me. I'll be in Greece.
Oh, so we're still recording. All right, well, I'll see you next Monday. I'll be able to tell you how the race went.
Awesome. Well, good luck with that. I'm sure you'll do fine, even if it might not be your best ever time. It'll be fine.
We'll get through it. Have a good day.
All right.
Connection with my family. All right, buddy. Well, listen, I hope the listeners enjoyed it. And yes. Keep sending us the feedback. Keep sending us your comments. Let us know what you want to talk about. And otherwise, we'll just catch up on Monday.
Exactly. And have a good week, listeners. Thanks for tuning in to the Mindful Path podcast with Nick Day and Hari Kalymnios.
We hope you found our discussions insightful and hopefully you've gained some valuable takeaways to support you on your own journey.
Please leave us a review on your preferred podcast platform and share an episode that resonates with you with a friend or family member who may also find it valuable.
Please also don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to ensure you never miss a future episode. And in the meantime, we'll continue exploring Mindful Path topics to provide you with more insights and more ideas to support you on your personal growth journey.
Thank you for your support and look out for the next episode of the Mindful Path podcast dropping soon.